Saving with Steve show, where we talk about the ins and outs of money. Everything under the sun relates to you having a happier, healthier relationship with money. My name is Steve Sexton. I want to thank you for joining us today. One of the topics we're going to be dealing with today is, in these uncertain times, what are the questions that you need to ask moving forward if you're managing your own portfolio or your advisor, so you can deal with the potential for the good, the bad, and the uncertain. Now, we also have something really special today, okay? We're beginning to feel and see the impacts of tariffs. Many other countries are feeling this as well. For example, Canadians, many of them are foregoing their snowbird trip, not just because the tariffs are up, is because the difference in the exchange rate. A Canadian dollar is only worth 72 cents in the US, and it makes it a lot harder for them to afford things. But during these uncertain times, it's so very important that you maintain your lifestyle. That means like not postponing travel, by learning smart ways to travel without breaking the bank. Now, we've got somebody special today. We've got Rod Griffin. He's the Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. He manages an award-winning national consumer education and advocacy program in North America, 25 years of experience in credit reporting, information service industry. He's an expert in consumer issues, particularly credit reporting, credit scoring, and identity theft. We're going to be talking about that towards the end. Rod frequently appears on radio, TV, and many other places, whether it be regional or national. He's an active advocate for financial education, financial inclusion. He currently represents Experian on their Jumpstart Coalition of Professional Financial Literacy. He's on the board of directors there. In addition to that, he was named badcredit.org's 10 most influential credit score experts in 2024. That's pretty big. The Institute of Financial Literacy recognized him as the Educator of the Year in 2016. He's a co-author of a wonderful book. I've already checked this into a little bit. Credit Repair Kit for Dummies. Gotta love that. 5th edition. Wiley's the publisher. Rod, thanks for being here today. We really very much appreciate it.
Steve, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. A lot of words in my title and things for some reason. I've been around a long time.
Become a mucky muck, you got to have that kind of stuff. It's either that or you have an alphabet soup behind it. You know what? I always like to ask, and our listeners love to know this, what got you involved with Experian and wanting to be an advocate, credit reporting? Sometimes that's not the most exciting things, but it becomes very exciting if it's done right and things get repaired.
Yeah, so my journey was starting as a journalist. In fact, I was a newspaper reporter. So always had that, how do I help people? How do I inform people? Moved from there to municipal government communications, and trying to make this story short, I was looking at the want ads for a job for my stepdaughter with my wife, and saw this thing now 28 years ago that said, we need a education writer for this company called Experian. And I just offhand said, I could do that. She said, send a resume. And I said, I have a government job. I don't have any stress. I'm working 8 to 5, sort of good benefits, all I pay. Send a resume anyway. So here I am 28 years later. And it's been an incredible journey. And Experian's grown. It was a US company at the time. We're now actually the largest global information services provider. And we're a British company, publicly traded on the London Stock Exchange. Data never leaves the US. We operate independently, nation to nation, which we'll get to our Canadian friends later. And it really is fascinating to me. And I've learned more about finance and about credit and how it can be a tool, and then about all the other things we do that we can talk about later too. So much more than just a credit bureau these days.
I was going to say, most people still think Experian's one of it's credit, because you're one of the 3 major credit agencies out there. So, everybody look, Experian's and then the others. But let's start talking about what my kids are actually leaving to go to New York to see a concert with a whole bunch of their friends. And you know what? The reality is travel can be very expensive. What are the smart ways to travel, whether to be major destinations like New York, Los Angeles, Florida, without breaking the bank?
Yeah, and it depends on the individuals, but it's really about planning. And you have to start early. You think about how you're going to get there. Are you going to fly? Are you going to drive? Depends on where you are. Or can you share those costs? If you're planning to fly, start searching early and make sure that you are all in the group. One of the important things is talk to each other first and know what your travel styles are. Somebody might want to fly first class. Somebody else might be coach, and another person might want to take their VW van. So you make sure you're all on the same page, or it can get challenging. But talk about how you plan to get there, and then where you're going to stay. Are you going to rent a house through like a Verbo or one of those other services? Are you going to stay in the Ritz-Carlton? Are you going to stay in I lost the name today. A lot of Europeans. I'll think of it later in about 20 minutes. But are you going to stay in someplace less expensive? Make sure that you're talking about it. Make sure you're making bookings early. Think about the benefits programs you have or points programs where you and awards or rewards programs you might have. You have a membership at one of those big box stores that does travel services, might have points that could save you money. Think about how you're going to pay for it. Sometimes using a credit card could give you cash back or discounts that because they have a relationship with that hotel or the hostel that you might want to stay at. That's where I was looking for. Look at all of the resources you have available. Maybe use points that you've accumulated on a credit card that you have forgotten are out there to reduce those travel costs. So there are lots of opportunities. It's just a matter of planning early, making sure you all are on the same page as to how you want to get there, where you want to stay, how much you want to spend.
One of our big questions, how early should somebody start planning and looking at things?
I'll give it a personal example. I'm into aviation, and there's a huge aviation event that just ended at the end of July. I want to go next year. I already looked, hotels are already booked. So you have to start booking. In some cases, depending on the event, it might be a year or more. And we've done that when we've traveled with friends. We planned vacations several years ahead, and we start looking at booking and what are the opportunities well in advance. Other things might be more spontaneous. If you're planning to go with friends, you have an opportunity that pops up. Maybe it's a week or two. That might be a little late. I'd always say at least several months, maybe even further when it comes to booking airfare and hotels, especially if it's like your kid's going to a concert. That's going to draw a crowd, and they're probably planning ahead too. So you want to get ahead of the crowd if you
A lot of people don't think about that because if you got 50,000 people going to the same concert, so that's 50,000 people who are looking for a place to stay and travel to come in there. And most of them are probably pretty booked. And what's really interesting when you said that is my daughter's got to go to I'm going to say a bridal shower in another state. And she's been procrastinating tremendously. So when she first looked, it was $157 round trip. Last time she looked, which was last week, it's $548.
Yeah, that will get you. I'm thinking about that trip we're talking about. You look at this events for a week in July, the week before and the week after, hotel rates, you can get them around $120 a night for a decent hotel. They're more like $400 or $500 a night during that event because the demand is there. So you have to think about that whole law of supply and demand kind of thing we learn in Econ 101. It's really important. If you can get ahead of the crowd and ahead of the demand, you can save some money.
Yeah, I was going to just say one other thing. My daughter went to Boise State, and we love going to the football games, and we're going to combine that with going to a wedding in late October. But when you take a look at the hotels that we typically stay at when we visit her, they're a little over $110. But if you're going during the homecoming weekend, so to speak, they're over $300 a night. And if you're getting a rental car, it's much more expensive. And since we're going to a wedding, we figured, hey, we'll just stay out 25, 30 minutes away from where we're going at. And the problem is, you don't realize there's thousands of people who are coming in for this thing. All the
Yeah.
parents, that's two times. And you know what? Even where we're staying out by the wedding, which is way a ways, it's still $250, $300 a night when it used to be $120 for a really nice place.
Yeah.
So it's really very interesting. Hey, folks, that's a good start. Next, we're going to talk about the big money mistakes people make when they travel with friends when we come back right here with more Saving with Steve. Hey, welcome back to the Saving with Steve show where we truly want to thank you for tuning in, appreciating and letting your friends and families and associates know about the show. All the replays are available on savingwithsteve.us. If you're enjoying the stories that have helpful information insight on Saving with Steve, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss a show. Check out a few of our affiliates at UK Health Radio, BBS Radio, Talk Radio New York City, E360 TV, AM FM 247. All these networkers are dedicated to empowering you to solve problems, uplift your spirit, live a life of personal and financial freedom. You can also follow us at Saving with Steve Sexton on Facebook. So right back with more Rod Griffin here from Experian. So Rod, people not always, but big money mistakes people make when they're traveling with friends. It's friends is you add that other dynamic. You got different personalities. Somebody's got to be the mom, somebody's got to be the dad, whether the group, the whole shot. What are the big money mistakes people make?
I think you hit the first one is exactly what you said. They don't talk to each other first. So everybody has different expectations for the way they like to travel. And you may be thinking, is it if you're traveling cross country, somebody might think, hey, we'll camp out in the tent. Would not be for me. Somebody might want to stay in a lower end hotel. Somebody might want to stay in a really nice place. Somebody might want to eat at a high end restaurant every night. And another person might want to cook on the campfire. Make sure you talk to each other and set your expectations early so that you're all on the same page. That's going to help you with the other big problem that people have is they don't budget. And people like that word, we'll call a spending plan, but they don't think about how much they want to spend. And with millennials and Gen Z, they tell us that it's not uncommon for them to go 50% over budget because they have fear of missing out, that old FOMO thing, and don't want to stop spending, or they feel pressure from the people they're traveling with to spend more. So that causes stress. So number one biggest mistake, talk to your friends, set a plan together, know what your budgets are going to be and where you're going to stay, and agree on that so that you don't create money conflicts for each other that can create lots of problems on the trip and potentially after the trip.
So communicate your expectations in reference to cost, because I have actually seen people, and I know my son and daughter, they took a trip to Japan last year with 12 friends. And they did plan way in advance and all that. But the interesting thing is the dynamic of everybody's budget. So some people they knew in advance wouldn't be going to certain things that were more expensive just because they had a different budget, and everybody was good with that. So I think it's a great point you put out there. Also, one of the things I noticed in the dynamic is my son does very well. Whatever the expense is, he's good with it. But other people, they're like, I'm going to spend the extra 50% that you talked about and deal with it later. So they'll slap it on a credit card and then they'll pay interest on it for the next year until they pay it off or longer, just because they want to keep up with their friends and don't want to feel ashamed or, hey, I'm not as that type of thing. So is that something of the experience that you're talking about there?
Yeah, exactly. People will automatically charge it, and it's really easy to do. The problem with that, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Actually, people like that. I can't hear you.
Can you hear my dog?
Yes, I can. We're good.
Yeah, somebody knocked on the door. My wife's trying to deal with it. Trying to explain all these things, and my dog is very vocal.
It's okay. Don't worry. Actually, our viewers actually get a kick out of that. And this might even make it go viral. We
Oh
had a
my!
dog jump right up on the screen one time, and everybody's like, oh, cool.
Yeah, this is my Bella, my half Chihuahua, half Shih Tzu, which also can affect travel plans if you have pets. You need to think about that.
Great segue.
Yeah, but where were we? So things when people charge it, and being in the credit world, we see that too often. And suddenly that trip that was supposed to be wonderful, it might be in the moment, but 6 months later, the holidays come along and now you can't buy the gifts you wanted because you have this debt you have to carry and you're taking on more interest rates that are going up, cost you more. So you don't want the trip to be a fleeting, wonderful experience and find out later when the bill comes that it wasn't. And that's why it's so important to set expectations. And like you said, and we've traveled with friends and done the same things in the past, that agree on what you want to do. And maybe you don't do all the same things. And we've traveled with friends where we said, hey, we're in an area, my wife and I like to do this. We know you're not particularly interested. We go our separate ways for an evening or for part of the day and then get back together later. It makes the trip a much better experience when you're planning ahead and respect the boundaries that people have.
Yeah, animosity is not a good thing on a travel vacation.
Not at all. And 20% of the people we surveyed in the millennial and Gen Z group said friendships have ended after trips as a result of that very issue. So that's the last thing you want, is to go on a trip with friends and then come back and not have those friends anymore.
Yeah, and nobody wants to play mom and dad to other people as well. So what other mistakes are people are making with whether they're traveling with friends or family or groups?
Yeah, underestimating the costs. I think that's a huge issue, especially if you're traveling outside the country or from one country to another. Understanding exchange rates can be a big issue because suddenly things cost a lot more than you anticipated. Things like entry fees or exit taxes that we took an overseas trip we did not know about, and we panicked because all of a sudden we had this extra fee we didn't realize we had. Turns out it was okay, but we worked through it. So again, it's about planning ahead. It's about doing the research. I think it's a great idea to sit down together with your friends and write it down and make sure you have the expectations very clear so that when you're traveling, you know what to expect. And if you're traveling alone, same thing, write it down, set a budget, plan ahead, and build in a little cushion because you may need it.
I think it's
Another
really
that I think is important, that can be costly. Make sure your passport's up to date and current today. That can be a really difficult challenge. If it's within 6 months of expiring, you might find yourself stuck in an airport somewhere, which happened to a friend of mine. They traveled to another country. They got there. They weren't admitted to the country because their passport was expiring. They got a temporary one so they could come home. So things like that.
two comments on top of that. One of the things that came from our listeners was many people traveled overseas, either to a European country that has the euro or the pound in England, and basically they didn't realize the exchange rate and the impact on their expenses.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that they didn't realize. So right now you have the euro, it costs $1.16 for 1 euro. So you have an imbalance there. On top of that, things are a little more expensive. So you really want to build that in to that. The second thing that we've had people come back with is, sometimes people lose documents or they get stolen. So you want to make sure you have somewhere a copy of that passport, because we just had somebody call in, or not call in, but email in and said, hey, you know what? Tell everybody to make sure they have a copy of their passport, because if they get lost or stolen, they can go to the embassy and get a passport replacement in a couple of days. Otherwise, it might take a couple of weeks and you could be stuck. So it's really important to see that. Now, you know what? One of the questions I have is how can groups, whether groups of singles, split expenses fairly without tension? Because that's a big thing.
Yeah, and it goes back to that early planning and conversations. You need to understand what the costs will be, lay them out. So what's your airfare going to be? What are your housing costs going to be? And then transportation costs and meal costs, and decide how you want to divide those. With meals, maybe you pick up your own costs, you decide where you're going to eat. With a rental, like renting a car, it's maybe easier to say, hey, we'll cover half of that and write the check at the end, but decide how you're going to split those costs. With housing, again, there's so many options today that can help make it much easier. If you're staying at the same hotel, maybe you pay for your own room, they pay for theirs, or maybe you're renting a suite with multiple rooms and you can split the cost. Renting a house can be very economical if it's in the right location, it has the right layout that you want. We've done this often and gone with friends and family and said, we're going to rent a house, and we split the cost just by thirds or quarters, whatever it might be, which can reduce that travel cost considerably. And again, it's about planning ahead and then deciding how you're going to travel in terms of airfare. What airline are you going to use? Maybe you take different airlines depending on where you're coming from and meet at that location because it's less expensive for one or the other of you to fly a different airline. Maybe you don't travel exactly together, but you get to the same place and then start the trip there.
Okay. One of the things I'd like to do when we come back because we just got to go to a break and pay some bills, is talk about, I know Experian has a lot and you know what, when it comes to trends of how people spend and when they travel versus friends, having a friend or versus alone. I'd like to understand all that because a lot of our viewers would like to understand what's going on. What are people doing today? So folks, you want to stick with us? We'll be right back with more Saving with Steve and Rod Griffin at Experian. Hey, welcome back to the Saving with Steve show, where we talk about the ins and outs of money. Truly want to thank you for sharing it with your friends and associates with the show. We're doing very well. We're getting close to the 1 million listener mark, and we just very much appreciate you for that. Now, we're talking with Rod Griffin here. We know Experian does a lot of data. And what are the travel trends for people, how they spend, whether they're traveling alone or like traveling alone with a spouse, alone, or traveling in groups. So we're interesting to hear that. Or if you have any data on where people are traveling to, that would be lovely as well.
Yeah, people are still traveling. They tell us they really want to travel, and it depends on their financial circumstance. And we hear people that they're traveling overseas to some extent. It's interesting now with the economy the way it is, a little bit perhaps less so at the moment. Going through the last several years, we just were talking at the break about COVID, and people were finding ways to travel, and RVs were a huge deal. So we're seeing a downtrend in that. They realize, and I was an RV or two at one point. Being with your family in an RV sounds great until you've done it for a while and you have kids trapped in a little metal box. But it can still be wonderful for a while. But it can be a challenge. And we're seeing costs go up there as well. So used to be traveling with an RV, staying in an RV park. An RV park was cheap. That's not so much the case anymore. Those costs are going up. But in terms of other travel, people are doing a lot of staycations. What they're telling us is they want experiences more than just the trip. They want to have memories and build memories. So it's not about going somewhere, buying things and coming home. It's about how do we build memories that could be closer to home. It could be in broader trips.
Can I hold you right there for a second?
Yeah.
Can I hold you right there? Okay, so help everybody understand what a staycation is.
Yeah.
We got 1,500 people saying, what's a staycation?
A staycation is staying home and doing some near local travel. So maybe it's a long weekend rather than a full week or two on an airplane. It might be a road trip to someplace you haven't visited nearby. I live in Dallas, and people ask me, what do you do? What can we do? We want to come visit you. And go, don't know, need to think about that because I don't explore my own city. And it's an opportunity to maybe save a little money, go to a festival that you've heard about, spend a day or two. It could be very low cost. It can be free in many cases, pay a little bit in gas money to get there. So it can be a great way to have experiences together and with friends or with your family and not have to incur a lot of costs or even a lot of time. So staycations can be a great way to get a break and do it very expensively. If you're taking a longer trip, you think about, as we said, thinking ahead, and they're still traveling together. Again, they want experiences together. So they're going to places. Ecotourism is becoming a bigger deal. So,
okay, help us out with ecotourism. That's another one that was like, what's that?
Yeah. So it's thinking about environmental travel, going to places that are very natural, that are very focused on minimal environmental impact, and having that experience in nature in a lot of ways. A lot of Central and South American hotels and resorts are now specializing in ecotourism. So when you go there, they have very minimal impact on the environment, and it's a very natural experience. And so that can be a great experience to have. Others are still saying, I want to go to the big cities that you think of. Let's go together to New York, or let's go to LA and visit Hollywood, or go to Orlando, the happiest place on earth for all the kids. I've been there, done that. I was always sure the parents look that way, but so those experiences are still very popular. So we still see that mix, and looking really more for the experience than just the trip itself.
You know what? Life is about experiences. So I totally get that. I live in a town called Temecula, California. It's just a little 30, 40 miles away from San Diego, but we have 30 wineries out here. So all my friends in San Diego, they come up here to spend the weekend and they go through winery tours. Other than that, there's not a whole heck of a lot other than the Old Town area where you have a lot of eclectic shops and stuff like that. And then all the people from here, they go do the staycations in San Diego and go see all the sights and the missions and all that kind of stuff and go to see the ports, and they will do a boat trip in the harbor and stuff like that, and or whale watching or whatever, and that's their staycation. And then for them that's a great experience, especially if they get to see a whale.
Yeah, and that's a great way to get together and relieve some of that stress. And in my family over the years, we plan big family vacations about every 5 to 7 years. And I have 3 stepdaughters. I have 5 grandkids. And it's a very interesting dynamic when you're trying to take a family with cutting across economic divisions. So it's different income levels and expense kind of things that they can afford. And our first trip, we went to Playa del Carmen in Mexico. And right before we went, there was a hurricane and it wiped it. We were going to go to Cancun, wiped out the hotel. So they shifted, and dealing with 3 kids, 4 grandkids at the time, the families was really interesting. But the thing to think about is travel insurance paid off for us. One of the best vacations we've ever had, because they moved us to another hotel. Half of the hotel was still not open. We were there by ourselves. And so we had a family vacation for about 2 to 3 days. And then other people started coming to our hotel and we got a little offended. It was kind of
Everybody treated you like kings, just so
we absolutely. I was like, we were the only, there were 10 of us or so, and we were the only people there for a couple of days. And sometimes it's that lemonade out of lemons, only this was like the whole tree. It was wonderful because we had planned ahead, and we had to think about, how do you have a 2-year-old be engaged and a 10-year-old being engaged, and the adults still be able to do what they want to do. And it took a lot of planning, but we were able to do it and do it on a budget that worked for everybody. And having travel insurance, a good idea.
You know what? I heard somebody pen this. They called it following a disaster. Do you remember back when Greece had their pension riot, so to speak?
Yeah.
Everything was happening in Greece, in the main town where the capital is and everything, but all the Greek Isles, nothing was happening there. We had a number of people that went to those Greek. Nobody was coming, so basically they got to stay in a hotel for about the equivalent of a five-star hotel. That was usually 200 or 300 a night for $80. At the hotel, they gave them free gifts to go eat and stuff like that. People wouldn't take tips or anything to move them around the country. They just wanted them to tell everybody that things were okay. And they said they had the best experience, and people treated us like kings. They gave us extra stuff at restaurants, poured extra wine when they didn't have to, and all that kind of stuff. And they just had an excellent time, and they spent next to nothing.
Yeah, it can be a phenomenal experience. It's sometimes that planning ahead helps. The not letting a natural disaster like a hurricane the week before you're supposed to leave or two completely destroy your plans. Stay in touch, work with the hotels and the travel providers, and it can really be a great experience. So don't panic might be another good piece of advice for travel.
Very true. Do you have when it comes to travel insurance, what's typical cost for travel insurance? I don't know if you know off the top of your head.
It varies, but it's really relatively inexpensive. I don't have any numbers right off the top of my head. If you're planning ahead and you know you're going somewhere that's going to be in a hurricane zone, it makes sense to invest in that for airfare and hotels. And it's really inexpensive, generally speaking. And we've used it just personally, and it's been worth the few dollars that it added to the trip.
If you think about it, it pays off in spades if you need it, even if you don't use it for 3 or 4 years, and then it's on the fifth year you need it. That's great.
And often you get it when you book a flight or you book a hotel. It's an option to add for that specific trip. So you don't even have to have a policy that's over a period of time independently. It can be tied to that booking that you're making specifically. It can be a one-off kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. Hey, folks, you're going to want to stick with us. We'll be right back, because next we're going to talk to Rod about how people can balance travel goals with their financial priorities like saving, debt repayment, or most importantly, improving their credit score. Stick with us. We're going to be right back with more Saving with Steve. Hey, welcome back to the Saving with Steve show, where we talk about the ins and outs of money. I want to truly thank you for tuning in and appreciate you for sharing us with your friends, family, and associates. Again, hey, check out a few of our affiliates at UK Health Radio, BBS Radio, Talk Radio New York City, E360 TV, Las Vegas TV Network, AM/FM 247. All these networks are dedicated to empowering you to solve problems, uplift your spirit, live a life of personal and financial freedom. And again, you could check us out at the Saving with Steve Sexton Insider Club on Facebook. And hey, go to our YouTube page. But let's really talk right now, Rod, about how people can balance travel goals, other financial priorities like savings, debt repayments, and you know what, improving credit scores, which is Experian. And
it's a part of Experian these days. Actually, it's an increasingly small part of Experian. And so we're obviously known as one of the nation's 3 largest credit bureaus. We're actually far more than that. We like to think of ourselves as a financial BFF, like a big financial friend, not necessarily best friend forever, but maybe, because as you go through life, we touch people's financial lives in so many ways. Credit's what we're best known for. Obviously, we've been doing that more than 100 years. And now, though, we have a credit card marketplace. So when you think about travel, if you're shopping for a card that might give you travel discounts or points, those sorts of things, it's a great place to go. If you're shopping for car insurance, we're an insurance agency. So you may save as much as $800 a year to our insurance marketplace. We provide other personal finance management tools and resources. So we are far more than just a credit bureau today, but it is a core part of what we do. And so understanding how credit works and how credit scores work is really important. Travel's expensive, no matter what you do. And often we either pay for it with a credit card or multiple credit cards. I've talked to some people, not necessarily a great idea, or loans in some cases. And so you need to understand what the impact will be on your credit history and understand what your credit scores are and how they work so that you can get the best terms and rates, because good credit is going to save you money in the long term. I think that's really important to understand.
So here's one question. You know what? I know we're talking about travel goals here, but a few people know that you're Experian. They know what
Yeah.
you do. And they're saying, hey, what are the ups and downs of consolidating credit card, other types of debt? What's the pros? What's the cons? What should people be thinking about if they're doing something like that?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about your credit history and credit scores, there are two things you absolutely have to do. First is pay your bills on time every single time. Late payments are going to wreck your scores. The second is keep your credit card balances as low as possible. We call it utilization rate or balance to limit ratio. The lower, the better. If you can pay the bill in full each month, that's going to be critical. So if you're looking at ways to reduce those debts, one of the things that people talk about is debt consolidation. That term can be used in a couple of different ways. The first, and the one that is really beneficial, is if you have multiple credit cards, for example, and you get a debt consolidation loan from a credit union or a bank to pay off those credit card bills, those accounts, those credit cards will be reported as paid in full. That's a positive. And then you have one loan that you make the payments for on time until it's paid off. That's going to build that positive history over time. That's going to help your credit scores. The other way we hear consolidation used is in what we call debt settlement, or you'll hear the term debt settlement. So what they debt settlement firms, there's some that are pretty good. Others will not be fully transparent. So they'll say, we'll consolidate your loan payments for you. What they do is you write one check to them or make one payment to them, and then they are supposed to then distribute it among the lenders you're paying, and they negotiate repayment for less than you originally agreed to pay. So it may be a lower principal amount. It might be different interest rate. The result of that is those accounts will be reported as settled in your credit report. When that happens, it's going to hurt your credit scores. So it's going to drag them down. So I tell people, make sure if you hear the word consolidation, understand what type of consolidation that they're talking about, because one can be really helpful. The other could be very damaging. Doesn't mean it's a wrong thing in some cases, but it's going to hurt your credit scores.
So let's talk about the first one, where somebody's consolidated a bunch of credit cards and they've got them to the point where there's not too much of a limit left on it, and then they consolidate it. You know what? When somebody's looking at it from a personal level, what are the things that people need to be dealing with to make sure because they're consolidating it for the reason of, hey, I need to pay this off at a lower rate. I need to get through this. But you know what? If they're not dealing with the spending issue,
Yep.
I'm just curious about that, because I see people that do the consolidation and I still see them driving around with nice stuff, and I know they never have any money.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a third way to think about it. So there's balance transfers from one card to another.
Oh, okay.
So if you have one card, you're maxed out, you can get a card potentially in our credit card marketplace at Experian, for example, can help you identify a card that you can do a balance transfer with. We have a thing called no ding decline. So if you apply and you don't get approved, it's not going to hurt your credit history, it's not going to hurt your scores. But if you transfer a balance from one card to another, now you have a card with a zero balance and one that may be higher but low interest rate, so you're paying it down. You're right. The challenge is, in order for any of those things to work, you also have to address the spending piece. You can't keep you can't look at that other card and they go, oh, now it has a zero balance, I can go buy some more stuff with it. And then you end up in deeper debt. I can speak to personal experience with that. When I was young, out of college, I got into credit card debt, was paying one off with another, and had to ask my grandma for help. And so she helped me pay them off. You do not want to have my grandma be the bank of grandma, because she would have been the world's best collector. You talk about grandma guilt. It was awful. I felt bad, terrible. Paid her off as fast as I could, but grandma guilt is real. But you have to stop spending too. That's the other half of the equation.
So what you're saying is grandma's hardcore.
Yeah,
She's better than the mafia.
yeah,
Okay.
kneecap, yeah, emotionally, not physically.
That's worse. One you can recover from, the other one is you're scarred. Oh, that's important. So the rule here is make sure you're dealing with the spending issue if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to exasperate the debt issue that you have in your credit problems. And you know what? You obviously can do the debt settlement, and then after that is basically bankruptcy. So yeah, that's very, very important. So let's talk about what are things people can do to improve their credit scores.
Yeah. So first, I always recommend Experian. For example, we have a credit monitoring service. There's a free service. We give you a free credit report, free credit score every month, and we give you what we call the risk factors that go with that score. So they tell you exactly what from your credit report most affected the score. That gives you an action plan. So it will tell you exactly what you need to work with. There are more than 220 million people with credit reports. Everybody's unique. Everybody has their own issues, their own challenges. Everybody's life is a bit different, and so is their credit history. So the things you need to do are probably different than the next person. So those risk factors tell you what to work on. Or some people, the number doesn't matter and they look at me like I'm crazy. And if I'm, yeah, of course it does if you're sitting with a lender applying for a loan. But if Steve, it's you and me talking, and I said, I've known you now for less than an hour, you look like you probably have a 285 credit score. People go,
Oh,
really?
thanks.
Credit score that goes from 1,300 to zero. Zero is the best. So a 285 is like an 830, 840 on a FICO scale. So without context, it's just a number. The risk factors are very consistent from one scoring system to another. So if you focus on those factors, the thing that's really important is your credit history. You have to take care of that credit history, know what's in it. Don't be afraid to look at it. It's free. We can help you monitor your progress, give you tools. If you want to get a free report through the federal site, annualcreditreport.com, you can get one once a week from each of the three bureaus. So you get 156 of them a year free. No, not to look at your credit report. I don't think you need to look at it once a week, but you could if you wanted.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's just talk about some of the things that you guys do. Because, like,
Yeah.
for example, I seem like I'm receiving one of these like once a quarter or once every 6 months from some company that's had a data breach. And
Yeah.
what they do is they say, hey, we're going to pay for your credit monitoring for 2 years. Okay, great. You know what? How do people protect themselves from the stuff on the black web, their information being stolen? How do they do that? I know you guys have all these tools to do those things, so let's talk about that because that's really important for everybody.
Yeah. And so another business we have is a fraud risk prevention mitigation business. It works with businesses, in fact, to help them identify breaches, recover from breaches, protect their systems. When you get a breach notice, always read it, always respond to it. If they're offering a free monitoring service, take it. It's not going to hurt anything. It certainly will never pass up a freebie, and that will give you more information. In terms of protecting yourself from identity theft, you can do everything right, and you'll probably still have your identity compromised. My name's out on the dark web. Experian's told me that in our monitoring service. So from there, it's a matter of just common sense stuff. One of the best things you can do is buy a shredder. If every piece of paper that leaves my house goes through a shredder, because that's where identity thieves still do their stock and trade. They dumpster dive. So if they can find paper with your name, your address, and maybe other information, they're going to use it. From there, monitor your credit history. Make sure you're checking your billing statements. Make sure that you're not using or sharing information online that you shouldn't. Social media is a huge one. If you think about posting a picture on a social media site and it's a picture of the back of your car, I always tell parents this: your car's license plate is there. So if they breach the DMV, they'll know where that car lives, what the address is. If you have that sticker with mom, dad, and two kids and the dog, they'll know how many people live in that household and roughly the ages. If it says my child's an honor student at, and they name the school, now they know where your child goes to school and where that school is and where your house is probably close to. So you give up a ton of information potentially that puts you at risk on social media from a picture. Think about what you're posting. Be careful about overposting. And if you're thinking about taking a trip or traveling, don't tell people I'm going to be on vacation from this date to this day and post along the way, because now they know you're not even at home. So that identity thief might become just a physical thief and break into your house. So be cautious about what you share on social media. Tell them about the trip when you get back and show all the pictures, not before you go or while you're there.
Yeah, you know what? If you remember a person by the name of Frank Abagnale, who actually is a consultant for the FBI and used to be
Mhm.
the feature of that movie, Catch Me If You Can,
Yep.
I listened to him a few years back at an event, and he was explaining to me, and he goes, you know what? Nowadays, people can have a cup of coffee, look at social media, and go after stealing your information. And he says
Yep.
the other thing is with credit monitoring, he says it's great, but they're gonna get that same notice, and they're gonna know it's gonna only be good for a year or two, and then they're gonna go look at attacking your credit score. So he just said, find a good credit monitoring service, pay for it to be the best investment you ever made.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? One last thing before we go here. First of all, I want to thank you for being here today, Rod. How do people get a hold, not of Rod, but how can people go? Experience pretty easy to find, but what are just run through the litany of services besides credit monitoring, fraud protection? You talked about insurance company for getting insurance. What other things that does Experian?
Yeah. Experian.com is a great place to go to find all of those links. So our credit card marketplace, our insurance marketplace, our monitoring services. Experian also provides automotive histories. We compete with that one with Furry Animal that they advertise. So
Oh,
their mascot, the fox.
okay.
Name names. But anyway, Experian Auto Check, we're actually the provider for the National Auto Dealers Association, NADA. So dealers use ours. You can get if you're planning to buy a used car, you can get an auto history report from us and help make sure you're not getting a
Okay.
woman or car that's been flooded in a hurricane, those sorts of things. And again, autocheck.com or go to Experian.com. You can find us there. If you want to join us and my team on Conversation every Wednesday, 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern, we're on X on Credit Chat. You can learn more about that at ex.pn/credit chat. And we do a podcast as well that talks to a number of people regularly about personal finance topics, not just credit, but all sorts of things as well. So we'd love to see you there.
And the name of that podcast again is?
It is called Credit Chat Live.
Okay, great. So I'll tell you what, we'll put that on our website so people can go. Rod, I very much appreciate you being here and sharing all this information with our listeners. I know there's people going, oh my God, I didn't know that. Oh my God, I didn't know that. And those ahas make all the difference in the world when it saves somebody money, protects their credit, and so on. So I really want to thank you for being here representing Experian. And again, I'd love to have you back another time to talk more in depth about the credit stuff and get into more detail and some stories and all that. So if you're open to that, I'd love to do that with you.
Absolutely. We could talk hours about credit. I could tell you about the person that wrote to me and said she couldn't make her credit card stop going and buying things. And I still want to see that credit card.
Gotta love that.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Rod, thanks again. Stick with us. We'll be right back with more Saving with Steve. Welcome back to the Saving with Steve show where we talk about the ins and outs of money. Tonight, right now, I just want to talk about how Wall Street traders are raising stakes on Mr. Powell ahead of that central bank annual meeting that's going to happen on August 22nd, the one that's going to be happening in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And it's happening tomorrow. It'll be a really important day, and we're going to see the effects of it when this actually comes out as Mr. Powell delivers his pivotal remarks that could validate or nullify investors' expectations for monetary easing. Traders, so far, you know what? Here we are before the event. We'll be sticking with notions that the rates will be lower, pricing in an 80% chance of a 1/4 point reduction. The area that I'm focusing on once they do that, and we'll see once this report comes out, is what's going on with the 10-year Treasury. You got to remember the 10-year Treasury, the thing that moves it is market and economic conditions. And everything you do, whether it be a mortgage, a credit card, an auto loan, many of your investments are based off that 10-year Treasury. How will it respond? Will interest rates go up? Will inflation increase? All this while tech stocks continue to get roughed up with investors feeling the concern about the AI boom and its staying power. Once again, that brings us back to the theme of navigating through all this uncertainty. And you know what? It's one of those things that we really want to pay attention to because we are looking at stuff like, what are the questions that I should be asking? What are the questions I should be asking myself if I manage my own investments or the person who hired me? What should I know for sure? What should I be focusing on? Because you know what? You need the answers to these things for yourself. If you're self-managing or the person you hired needs to be asked the following questions and they need to be able to give you a solid answer. And you know what? We could just use many of the Wall Street big titans. We go with Warren Buffett, one of the most prolific value investors of all time. One of the interesting things right now is, you know what, Warren Buffett, that Berkshire Hathaway's has tripled the cash position. So why is he doing stuff like that? So the first question is, your portfolio, your current portfolio, currently engineered to take opportunities of the good? Is it set up for the good? How is it set up? Got to remember, folks, in chaos, there's always opportunity. So think about what Warren Buffett is doing. He doesn't buy anything that are overpriced, overvalued. So what he's doing right now is getting prepared for when things change, and he takes that opportunity and grow. Because you remember the last time, he came out smelling like a rose, but more importantly, he had the cash to do it. Now, one of the other things that Mr. Buffett knows, that there's a big red balloon. You remember the big red balloon, how sad it was when it popped for the boy? You remember that old story? Now it's big red balloon number 2, but the difference is big red balloon is floating around Wall Street. And when a pin connects with that red big balloon, you get that pop. That's right. Okay. So the second question is, you need to ask yourself or your advisor, is my portfolio engineered to absorb losses? And if you think about Warren Buffett's with triple the cash position, he's getting prepared. And the last question is dealing with uncertainty. Folks, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, they've got triple the cash position because they're dealing with the uncertainty. And you know what? We've been seeing uncertainty, and uncertainty will be with us for at least the next 6 to 12 months. And it's going to be ruling a lot of the decisions you make. We are in an uncertain world. So the next question is, how is your portfolio engineered to navigate through uncertainty to ensure you come through unscathed with your lifestyle intact? Because you know what? You have a choice to which route you want to take. There's no rules that says you have to stay where you are and stay on that train. Do you know how simple it is to get on another train? You just jump off and hop on. Same thing with financial well-being. All it takes is a simple, small, intelligent strategy adjustment to adjust the course for your financial well-being. With that, think about those questions. What does it mean to do? I just wanted to give you something to think about. And you know what? Next time, we're going to talk about what happened after the Federal Reserve meeting. And we're going to be able to see what occurred all in the next 7 to 10 days. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Rod Griffin and Experience was just wonderful. The knowledge he communicated, I recommend you watch this again. If you would like to go to their creditchat.live podcast, hey, we're going to put that link on the website so you can check it out. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you sharing us with your friends and family. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week right here on Saving with Steve.